Stephen asks Eric, he goes, this used to be contrarian. I was a big believer in, being in the office, sharing space, doing all this stuff. And so I have pushed that with my own company, my own teams. I'm a firm believer in it. Eric kind of comes in and agrees with it. And so let me play it from here.
Is robbing them of something which I think is important. This was a contrarian view. It's become less contrarian as the big tech companies in America have started to roll back some of their initial knee-jerk reactions to the pandemic. A lot of them are asking their team members to come back into the office at least a couple of days a week. What's your point of view on this?
So I have a strong view that I want people in an office. It doesn't have to be all one office, but I want them in an office. And partly it's for their own benefit. If you're in your 20s, when I was a young executive, I knew nothing of what I was doing. I literally was just lucky to be there. And I learned by hanging out at the water cooler, going to meetings, hanging out, being in the hallway. Had I been at home, I wouldn't have had any of that knowledge, which ultimately was central to my subsequent promotions. So if you're in your 20s, you want to be in an office because that's how you're going to get promoted. And I think that's consistent with the majority of the people who really want to work from home have honest problems with commuting and family and so forth. They're real issues. The problem with our joint view is it's not supported by the data. The data indicates that productivity is actually slightly higher in when you allow work from home. So you and I really want that company of people sitting around the table and so forth, but the evidence does not support our view.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Is that true?
It is absolutely true.
Why is...
Okay, so I love this. I really, really love this. And again, not because, see, gotcha. I loved Eric's honesty about this. And this is one of my biggest challenges with people who push back on remote hybrid work is it's often this, no, because it's better, it's more productive, it's all these other things. And Eric, former CEO of Google, openly acknowledges the data says otherwise. The data is, as much as I wish it didn't, the data is there. And I think when you can acknowledge that, it allows you to have a better conversation. Because here's the thing, his point about being in your 20s, here's what I saw as I listened to both of them talk about this. Both of them have their own experiences that has shaped how they have achieved some of the things that they have. And so they've attributed their experiences to what led to that. And you hear this with Eric as he goes, well, when you're in your 20s, you get this. And what I actually hear him saying is, when I was in my 20s, that's what I got. Therefore, I attribute that to my success. But he doesn't say that. And I think it's because I don't even know that he necessarily realizes that was your personal experience. And it is completely possible for somebody to have a radically different experience and achieve the same outcomes, which is why the data shows it's possible. And I think this is where people assume that I think any company that has people come into the office is like ridiculous. And I don't. What I have an issue with is when they go, no, it's because it drives it's better. And it's like, it's not better. It's a preference. And you know what? To Stephen and Eric, if that's what their preference is, so be it. So long as you acknowledge our preference is actually at the expense of some of these other things that we also say are important. And we're thinking through how are we countering those? Because we're losing productivity. We're losing engagement. So what are we doing to compensate for those instead of going, no, this gives us that when the data says otherwise? And I think this is where we just need to spend more time objectively talking about what really is going on here and how do we solve this in a meaningful way? Because you know what? And I've been in situations with this where I've worked with senior execs where they go, I just can't get past this. This is where I am. And I've said, that's okay. So then let's talk about what that looks like. And maybe, again, going back to the culture point, maybe we need to talk about what your culture is. And there are going to be some people that you just need to say, this is not the place for you because it's not going to work for you. And you might have to have a different hiring pro. And you need to accept that that is a trade-off of you preferring this. And just acknowledge that and say, the data shows this, therefore my preference towards this is that. I mean, think about this. I know there are certain things that I like to eat that aren't necessarily healthy for me, right? I love apple pie around Thanksgiving. The last few nights I've had apple pie for dinner. That's been my dinner. a nutritionist would say, Christopher, that's terrible. You're not getting the vitamins you need. You're not getting, and I'm like, I know, I don't care, and I counterbalance that by not doing that all year long and things like that. But I don't go into it, nuh-uh, apple pie is fruit and fruit is healthy. And therefore I can have apple pie all year long because I like apple pie and I think apple pie is healthy. Like you're not living in an objective reality when you do that. And I think that's where we need to have more conversations on the reality of things. And that's why I appreciated him going, I wish it was true that this is a better model to operate. The data doesn't support it. And so that then leads to having a more productive conversation that I think we need more of those. So I enjoyed it. And I can even have a better conversation with an Eric Schmidt because he recognizes that. And then it's like, well, so then let's figure out the outcomes and figure out how we drive that and what that looks like. So that is where I landed on the, so looking at that, that is what I came up with for the business side. Those were the business pieces that really stood out to me that I thought were really notable or where I wanted to add additional clarity. So I want to transition now to the technology pieces because they do talk a lot about technology throughout this. One of the things, I'm not going to pull up the clip from it, but, they talk a lot about, Eric openly says, and this is to me why AI is such a significant thing. He talks about the fact this is one of the macro changes that changes everything. It's like the internet. It's like electricity. And I completely agree with that. I've said that for a long time, for that very reason that, it's not like in the example he uses. I think it was a great illustration. He's like, this isn't like cryptocurrency, or VR, where people go, this is going to change the world. It's like, no, it's big, it's innovative, it's significant, it will have big implications, but it's not an everything kind of change. And, AI is. And so similar to the work from home, it's like, you have to approach the conversation differently and think about it differently.